The United States today is confronted with something that we have not been confronted with for a long time. And it's a slow drip. It's kind of that boiling the frog in the water where you read things in the paper and we don't feel as competitive as before, and we start to hear things about our education in this case and others. But the challenges coming at us are faster and more in-depth than they ever have been before. The global forces are compressing product life cycles. Why does that make a difference? Well, if you had a product life cycle that was 8 years, you had people who could be doing the same thing for 8 years, and they went to a certain institution, they were trained, they were educated a certain way, and they were able to do that. Well, now when you have a product life cycle that might be 3 months, what does it mean? It means the individual itself, the person, the job market, is stressed beyond the outside world. In addition to that, margins are compressing for companies. As margins compress, some of the big issues associated with that is the price continues to go down and down. Consumers like it, but companies then have less, if you will, put it in this term, disposable income. Less disposable income to do what? To train, to have education centers, or to sponsor some of those things. So this chaos, and it is chaos, every Monday morning I wake up, I cross my fingers and say when I get into the office, it will have ended. Has not come true, will not come true. So you've heard this expression called the new normal. It is the new normal. Will we get comfortable with the new normal? As I'm doing my own demographic poll of the audience, maybe not. Will our children? Possibly. But we can't get comfortable with the fact that we're not comfortable and they may be, because there's a lot of time in between that. We're competing well as a country. This is earnings season. A lot of companies increased earnings. Those of you who would like to buy a great employment services company went up 21% in net income last quarter. So we have to hold our own on a competitiveness basis. And in fact, we're doing quite well. But we cannot be seduced into the here and now. We cannot be seduced into what we might be thinking about how well we are doing as businesses right now. Because the fact is, it is completely different than ever before. The bounding, just picture it, what we did. We bounded from one activity, from one invention to another, and with it created a great wake of opportunity. Creating innovation that companies were able to do was absolutely incredible. All along the way of that bounding from one opportunity to another, what happened? More people were educated, more people were hired, more people grew within the jobs. Company created more flexibility to implement training programs and education programs. But, without being overly depressing, the bounding is over. We are not going to be as easily from one place to another. We must now rappel, hand over hand, on the north face of the economic wall in order for us to get ahead. Of course, the scaling of the wall will be harder than ever before. We're going to have a tremendous amount of sweat on our brow. And we have to anticipate what's next so that we can pass it a little bit further down, if you will, into the supply chain so that it can be adding value to companies. This bounding, as I said, will be, or this creation will be harder and harder. And we must accept that there is little wake or tail to many of the economic inventions and companies that are now being born. If you think about that, our job is harder. The number of companies must increase in order for us to keep up with employment, and education is a big part of that. Instagram sold for $1 billion 2 weeks ago. Do you know how many employees were at Instagram? 13. If they divided it up, they each got $85 million. So what is an invention today, which is fantastic and it moves us forward and it does great things, does not create the same kind of wake of opportunity that we've seen before. As the world gets more complex, Americans must be educated more. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. It is getting more complex and we must educate. However, what we have done in the past, I can assure you, is not going to be good enough for what we need in the future. College enrollment in the United States has grown significantly in the last few decades. However, only 42% of young people who enroll in college complete bachelor's degree by the age of 26. Forget the outcomes of that. Look at the turmoil in the middle of that, of starting and stopping, childcare, all of those other issues associated. And just 12% complete an associate's degree. Among low-income students, the bachelor's completion is even lower at 26%, with only 14% achieving an associate degree. This is not true on with other countries, and in fact, they are improving. We are winning and had been winning the race in post-secondary education. The reality is we are no longer doing that. We are no longer winning. I run a global company with 15% of our $23 billion in the US. The rest is outside the US. But I'm an American. And I want this system, which is the system of innovation, to continue to be the world leader of how we are driving. Any of you watched the Masters? You saw the ExxonMobil commercials. Remember that one where they had the pictures of the countries going past the screen? It was very clever, very insightful commercial. It was those countries scoring the highest math scores. We were 25th. You had to wait for like 3 screens to go past. My wife, who's a physician, said, I had no idea. So part of it is awareness, and part of it is driving that awareness, which is one of the best things that CED can do. Georgetown University study projects that nearly 22 million workers with post-secondary degrees will be needed in 2018. But the U.S. higher education system will fall short of that mark by 3 million. These are big numbers. 3 million that will fall short. To make matters even worse, the skills mismatch is actually getting bigger and bigger. The skills mismatch is where a company wants somebody, the people who think they are able, the individuals, to take that job, the mismatch is occurring greater and greater. So now I get a university degree, a post-secondary degree, an associate's degree, and I may not even be able to get hired. At ManpowerGroup, we've conducted for the last 7 years a survey of the hardest and most difficult jobs to fill. 39 countries, 40,000 employers. We do it every year. In fact, there will be one, the 2012 will be coming out next month. The United States has moved from the midpoint of the 39 countries just a few years ago to the 7th highest. In other words, the skills mismatch is one of the highest. In fact, it's 51% of the companies in the US say they cannot find the right individuals to fill the jobs. What I'm talking about is not stacking up to something that we can just sit around with and not do anything about. In my home state of Wisconsin, and yes, we are going through a few unique challenges, I am dying to see a McDonald's commercial. Anything other than a political commercial is what I'm looking for right now. So I have decided to travel more in the next few months. Wisconsin, we're not that unique, actually. Our 2010 census data, Wisconsin had 38% of its workforce, 3 million person workforce between 25 and 64, with a 2-year degree or better. In 2018, 61% of the jobs available in Wisconsin will require at least a 2-year degree. 61%, 2018, not that far away. We currently have 38%. Big difference. Between now and 2018, Wisconsin is projected to have nearly 1 million job openings, and over half of them will require at least a 2-year degree. This gap is a core part of the chaos that will happen. The fact that we will not be able to compete on a global basis, let alone a national basis. A large Wisconsin company, Johnson Controls, they have many products, but it might be a little switch on the door to control your heating and ventilation. The service techs, 30% openings in their service techs, and they have 30,000 of them across the US. They can't find service techs. Average pay for the service techs, $82,000 a year. Can't find them. Medallion schools, yes, they're the answer to some of this. We should never give up on our top institutions, the research institutions. They create a tremendous amount of economic value. However, it does not fill the requirement of scale. When it comes to moving our economy forward, we must have scale, and by definition, that must be, as Roger mentioned, through the broad access institutions. Vocational, technical, online, creative, innovation, we must collect all of those to look at some of those gaps in the numbers I talked about in order for us to compete. Why CED? I'm involved in CED because it is a place where I can voice my opinion, everyone else can, and we all know it's not about our opinion, it's about the action after our opinion. It's about taking it locally, it's about being clear, it's about being persistent, it's about using our contacts in the government to bring forward a nonpartisan document that says, look folks, we're in trouble, let's get this fixed. That's why I'm so compelled to work with CED. That's why, and maybe for the fact that I had no idea it was going to be 2 years, I got involved in this. And as was said before, it does not stop here. This is simply the words on the page. It's the actions after. Of course, there are a lot of passionate, smart, experienced people working in this field, and some would say they've been successful, and some would say they haven't been. But we can't give up. We can't stop. We have to push forward now more than ever before. Our ability as a business community to drive that forward on a state level, at your mayoral level, and not give up on it, and participate in the right kind of fundings, which will be some of the things that Pat and Bruce will talk about as we get into some of the recommendations. This is the way I look at it. Education brings honor and hope. Both of them are sorely needed in the United States today. So, with that, that would end my remarks for the reason why we should be working in post-secondary education. What I'd like to now do is introduce Bruce McCleary, who is going to bring us through an understanding of the report. As was mentioned by Charlie, Bruce has had a tremendous amount of involvement, both on the academic side and on the practitioner side when it comes to education. So Bruce has been a tremendous co-chair and somebody that I have relied on a tremendous amount. So Bruce.